Landgrebe Lawn Care is looking to add some more lawns for the 2024 season. If you or someone you may know is interested, you can contact Austin Landgrebe at 641-660-7874 for free estimates. Landgrebe Lawn Care will also travel outside of the Sigourney area. Bush and small tree work, lawn rolling, and much, much more. Landgrebe Lawn Care for all your lawn care needs. Call 641-660-7874. Mowing, rolling, sweeping, snow blowing, and lots more. Now doing skid loader work.
And now, your hosts of the Card Subject to Change podcast, for frequency's sake tag team champions of the world, the Wizard CZ, and never wrong, Nick Gold.
Hello, one and all, and welcome to another exciting edition of the Card Subject to Change podcast, episode 109, Behind the Lens. We've got a very special guest we'll get to here in a second, but we want to thank you for joining us here tonight. I know it's a busy time with spring schedules, spring sports. As we record this, it's Selection Sunday, March Madness, and we're happy you selected us. You're along here for the ride, whether you're listening live or listening on a rebroadcast of this. We are so happy you're here, and we're so happy because we've got, well, the Wizards here, of course. Obviously, we got to be happy that the Wizards here.
Well, I mean, you don't have to be happy.
Well,
but
I mean, we got to be happy he's here. You're here, man. You're one half of the tag team champs of the network. We got to defend these belts, and we're defending them here. And we've got a great guest this week. We've been really excited to get this guy on. It's been about a month or two in the works, but we finally got him. You can catch him most of the time ringside at your favorite local indie show. You can also catch his work on Facebook under the Facebook page Tag Team Photography. We are talking with the head of Tag Team Photography, none other than Clint Dye. Clint, how are you doing?
I'm doing good, guys. It was a busy day of working outside, but it's been a good day.
Yes, sometimes that the wrestling real life balance has to kick in at some point, right? You got to get stuff done around the house.
Yeah, it's always JT Energy, and I've joked about this before. When there's shows on like a Saturday and then nothing brings you back down to reality when Sunday hits and you got housework and stuff like that. And then Monday you're back to your regular work and it just kind of slowly brings you back down from what you did the night before. So
I hear you. You can catch Clint ringside. Clint has got, we're glad we got Clint here. He has got a wonderful perspective on things as he watches most wrestling shows that we're at through a little screen about like this as he's taking pictures. So before we get into the picture taking and talk about Clint's love and whatnot, I want to ask Clint the first question I ask every guest here that comes on the show. I mean, it's a spoiler alert. Every show starts off the same. So if you're just tuning in, you know what question I'm going to ask. And Clint, what is it for you with wrestling that got you hooked? Why pro wrestling? Why do you like pro wrestling? What's kept you coming back? What's kept you in it? What got you hooked from the get-go?
When I was a kid, first show I ever went to was in Kemper Arena down in Kansas City because I grew up in Kansas City.
Cool.
I got to see Hulk Hogan and the Big Boss Man in the main event, and just something that my dad kind of introduced me to, and I've just grown to love it over all the years. And my fandom has just continuously grown and grown. And during the Monday Night Wars, I was there flipping channels from TNT to USA, back and forth, calling my best friend, saying, "Oh, did you see him? Did you see him?" You know, and it just grows over time. And then in college, I still was a fan. I didn't watch it as much. I was a little busy doing the college things that kind of keep you from watching wrestling as much, partying and having fun and all that. But I still paid attention here and there, and then got out of college and still liked it and loved it from the very beginning, you know, from the start of it. And now that my kids have all gotten into it as well. You see them at the shows with me, and they all love it, including my daughter, and they just have just the best time in the world at these shows. My wife gives me a hard time. She's not a huge fan of pro wrestling, never has been, but she kind of puts up with my love. She would put it in her vows that she puts up with my obsession with wrestling. So it's always been there, you know, and then we moved up here and found a freaking mecca of pro wrestling in Iowa with all the promotions here. So it kind of worked out for this big wrestling fan.
Absolutely. Clint, you were talking about the Monday Night Wars. I am, that was my high school years. I'm an era of the Monday Night Wars,
Yep.
but I wasn't a channel clicker. I would watch Monday Night Raw,
Yep.
and then I would watch the replay, which happened immediately after of WCW of Nitro.
Yep.
I got to ask you though, were you a Nitro guy or were you a Raw guy?
What's funny is I was a Raw guy, and I remember there were two guys who were in my older sister's grade, and we were in art class together, and they were always just bashing WWE. And like, I didn't hate either promotion. I enjoyed both, you know.
Sure.
But I leaned more towards the WWF at the time just because it was always there, you know, and WCW was kind of this different thing for me. Like I'd seen WCW in magazines and WCW Saturday Night. And then when they started doing Nitro, I don't think I really paid attention much to Nitro until the NWO kind of started. And that kind of got me to flip over, which I'm sure a lot of people, when the NWO started gaining steam, really got them watching both. And so when that started, I was a channel flipper like crazy, you know, and calling my best friend Lucas, and he was there watching it too. I used to always get a large pepperoni pizza, hot stuff pizza. That's a reference to a pizza that I don't even think is around anymore, but that was my Monday routine, was having pizza and watching wrestling. So
I remember hot stuff pizza, and I don't think it's around anymore. Great reference from the 90s, dude. That is awesome.
So hot stuff pizza was great.
Yes, it was. Yes, it was. Clint, you talked about the mecca of wrestling we have here in Iowa, and I'm glad you said that word, because we really do. Iowa really has this untapped backyard of wrestling promotions, not backyard indie wrestling, not backyard wrestling, but in Iowa, you walk out your backyard here, there's all these different promotions you can go to on any given weekend. Talk about the organizations that are out there that are just so easy to get to within a couple hour drive that you can go see. There's more out there besides just SCW Pro, which is how I met you and seen your work through.
Zach Takis and I have talked about this a lot. He does the Shotgun Wrestling Radio Show.
Yep.
He had mentioned to me that through, I think, March through April, every weekend there's a show in Iowa somewhere.
Isn't that crazy?
Yeah, just to think that many promotions now. It's almost became too flooded with promotions, but everyone's doing their own thing. For the most part, everyone kind of has their territory. You know, the territory days, it's alive and well. You know, you see promotions running in the Quad Cities. You see it's everywhere. And SCW, obviously, you guys know me from there for mostly. CEW is kind of where I started. Central Empire Wrestling is where it all kind of began for me.
Austin Bayless has been on the show, friend of the show. Yep.
Yeah, and Austin, he kind of brought me into it. And it's funny how it all started. We moved up here to Oskaloosa in 2018, December of 2018, and I saw a poster at one of the Casey's here for Central Empire Wrestling shows, their 10-year anniversary show. And at the time, I was kind of working for the newspaper in New Sharon and Oskaloosa a little bit. And Storm Thomas used to play football at William Penn. And so the newspaper asked me if I could do an article on Storm, because it was supposed to be his final match as he was moving down to Florida. And so I was already going to be interviewing him for the newspaper. And so I reached out to Austin after he personally brought me the tickets one day. And I asked him if I could bring my camera, because I was planning to come to the show and I was going to interview Storm. And he's like, yeah, go for it. Then the Thursday before the show, he reaches out, and his photographer that he had planned couldn't make it. And he's like, well, you're going to bring your camera. He's like, do you want to shoot the show ringside? And I'm like, hell yes, I do. Like, this wrestling like the dream come true, you know? And so my son Emmett, he's 12 years old, he's been with me from the very beginning at all the shows. He was sitting front row and I was shooting ringside. And then from Austin, he kind of introduced me to Troy Peterson with Impact Pro Wrestling. And I shot one of their shows later in the year, and I've done theirs, you know, a lot of theirs since then. And we've done the Hall of Fame show in Waterloo for them. And JT Energy was my connection to SCW Pro, because I knew JT from CEW at the time, and he had told me that he was wrestling for SCW, and I'd never heard of them before. And so my son Emmett and I went to one of their shows at Beer Stube, and it was one of their outside patio shows.
Sure.
And I just took pictures from the fan perspective, because they already had a photographer and I wasn't going to get in his way. And just over time, they invited me back to shoot their shows, and I took pictures ringside, and I've been doing that for almost 4 years now. And then after SCW Pro, Madhouse and Absolute Pro Wrestling both got started. And what was cool about being there with them is I was there from the very beginning with their shows. The first show, I was at each one of their first shows, and I've been to their shows since then. I've missed a couple Madhouse because they've had conflicting schedules at times, which doesn't happen often, a lot, but it does ever so often. So, you gotta kind of schedule it where you're going to one night and then the other one the next night. So being there for the beginning of those was really cool to see how it all started, see what went through it. I write for a wrestling website called Pro Wrestling Post, and I interviewed Malice. I interviewed Jason Prentice. I interviewed Shank. I interviewed Luke Raven before they got going. So it was kind of like hey, this is coming. These promotions are coming. And then since then, I've had great relationships with all those guys. They all love my kids, know all the promoters. They let my kids come to the shows. The wrestlers know the kids now, which has been kind of cool because I've been able to avoid that heartbreaking conversation where you have to tell them, hey, it's not as real as you think it is. It's real, but it's scripted and everything like that. Them being at the shows, we're there probably an hour before the doors open. So they get to see the ring being put together. They get to see the ring getting taken down after the shows. They see the wrestlers coming in when they're not in their wrestling character mode. So having that made it a little easier, especially for my son Emmett, who's the diehard of all of my kids. I didn't have to break his heart so much, where he kind of started putting it all together like, oh, maybe it's not as real as I thought, but it kind of like movies, I can still love it. And even though my boys have become smart fans for as being as young as they are, when they're at the shows, they get sucked in just like watching WWE. Like 2 weeks ago at the EW show, when everything went down in the main event and Rory Fox and company, took down JT Energy's 4-year reign and formed their own little faction. I can always tell if something works that a promotion's doing by my son Emmett's reactions. And he was stunned. He knows how it all works at this point in time, but he still was so emotionally invested that it was a cool moment to see that. So,
and that's the magic of pro wrestling right there. I want to go back to something you said a little earlier. You're booked all over the state of Iowa to take pictures ringside. When you do have a conflict and there's 2 shows going on the same, what's the deciding factor as to where you go?
Well, a lot of times last year, for a specific instance, Madhouse had a show in November, as did APW. They both had a show on the same night. They had them in October too. So in October, I went to the Madhouse show because it was a little closer to home than APW was. Then I flipped it, and Madhouse was going to be in Minnesota, which I'm going to that show this year. I will not miss that one. And APW was closer to home. So that's how I kind of pick between them. That'll determine a lot of it, is the distance that I have to take the kids. That's a big determining factor. I don't really go by any favorites. I love all the promotions that I shoot for pretty equally. And it's usually just kind of depends on when the next show is that I'll be able to be at for the promotion that I'm missing out on, and then how far of a drive it is too.
Heather Woods chiming in. You were talking about CEW. Rory Fox, hashtag not my champion.
You're listening to the Card Subject to Change podcast. We are powered by Lopez Pizza, built by Durham Remodeling, colored by Ryan Allison Tattoo. We have special guest photographer Clint Dye on. And Clint, you kind of talked about the infancy stages when Austin Bayless gave you a chance to come to a show and start shooting. Talk about the birth of tag team photography. When did you know, hey, when did you turn your love into taking pictures into, hey, this is something that I could really run with? When did tag team photography really take off running, I guess?
Well, tag team photography started long before we moved up here.
Okay.
I've been shooting high school football for almost 2 decades now.
Okay.
I worked for a newspaper down in Missouri, my hometown. I got to give a shout out to my good guy, Brett Atkinson, who runs the newspaper down there. Him and I, we prided ourselves on the football coverage we gave to 3 local high schools, and we would put our coverage up against any other small town newspaper in the country. Probably we've won awards for our articles we've written, our pictures we've taken. We've done a really good job with it. And then on the flip side of that, my wife and I have taken pictures at weddings before. We did my brother-in-law's wedding. I've done a few of my high school classmates' weddings that we've done down there. And my wife does photography too, but she does more of like family pictures and senior pictures and youth sports for, the youth sports, the graphics that you get with youth sports pictures and stuff like that.
The moms with the buttons on their purses.
Exactly. She does a lot of that stuff and she's great at it. She kicks a lot of ass at that. And so when we came up with this, we're like, well, let's just call it tag team photography. I jokingly said that, wrestling background and having the love of wrestling. And she went with it and she came up with our logo and everything. And then when we got up here, I just happened to fall in this area of pro wrestling that's just been amazing to be a part of. And I already had the name of the photography company to go with what I'm doing with pro wrestling. My wife likes to joke whenever she posts something on the Facebook page that doesn't happen a whole lot when we do like team pictures and things like that. She likes to mention we do more than just football and pro wrestling. So more towards that, but we do offer that quite a bit more than that. We're doing my niece's wedding in December. We're going to take pictures at it. And I did a good friend of mine from high school's wedding 2 years ago down in Missouri. So tag team photography started long before I started doing the pro wrestling stuff.